I'll try to do two things. One is to be really clear on what we think IPX brings as value very pragmatically, and at the same time raise some questions, food for thought, some controversial questions as we go along. But first, just like one slide to remind for those that don't know who PCCW Global is. So PCCW is the premier Hong Kong telecom provider, full quad play provider. Hong Kong is a small market, but highly unregulated, highly competitive, highly tech-savvy, and a good laboratory to see what's going to happen next in the telecom industry. PCCW Global is the international arm of PCCW, and we cater to enterprise market and carriers, service provider markets with MPLS products, IP transit, and voice services. And that's with those assets that we go into IPX and try to leverage them with IPX services. So what is IPX? So, sorry. Without going into details of what's on this slide, for us what's really important is that IPX is not one network. It's a set of networks, and it's at least, most cases, two IPX networks between two service providers. So the first thing when you look at IPX is looking at interconnection. If there is no interconnection, you just connect to a few islands, and you go from a bigger island to a slightly bigger, to another medium, etc. Interconnection needs to happen. That's the value of the ecosystem. The other important point is multi-services, like the previous panel speakers are reminded, and it's also IP end-to-end, private IP, QoS IP. This is really the drivers of IPX. Now, what brings service providers to IPX? So if we look at voice, for instance, end of life for TDM technology and a move to IP will push them to, or some of them earlier than others, but will push them to migrate to voice over IP and voice over IPX if we're looking for high quality service to replace TDM interconnections. Cost efficiency of operating IP services is much higher than legacy TDM, either for the switching side or the transport internationally. The launch of LTE data and voice roaming will certainly be the killer app, the thing that you need IPX for. You cannot delay it, you need it. However, I would like to say something, and that will be the first controversial part of this topic. If you look at LTE diameter and LTE roaming, we hear a lot about it. It's a big buzzword, a lot of reports, a lot of studies, etc., a lot of traffic. But not everything that happens on the domestic translates into the carrier side. IPX is a carrier interconnection. It's not a domestic service. It's a carrier interconnection. The GSMA has big figures on, for instance, LTE deployment, LTE interconnections, but it never says how much incremental revenue does LTE bring. It says how much LTE revenue you will have in 2015, and that's mostly customers that were in 3G that now are buying a 4G plan. But how much incremental revenue you get, you don't know. When they talk about LTE traffic, it's huge volumes, but usually those are volumes that are generated on the domestic side and remain on the domestic side. How much LTE revenue is projected as the roaming revenue or traffic that will go over the IPX? I don't know any real figure that shows that, because it's very hard to predict. Now, if we compare to what's happening today and what's happening in GRX. First, LTE, the GSMA released some figures last week, and I think they're saying that 2% of all the 6 or 7 billion phone connections that exist today, 2% are LTE. Out of these 2%, there is 0.0 something that are enabled for roaming. So we're talking about a very, very small percentage. In 2017 or 18, I don't remember, they say it will be 20%. So the growth is huge, but it's still only 20%. Now, if we look at GRX traffic, well-established market, GRX traffic in AM6, which is the biggest exchange for GRX, at peak during summertime, it reaches 3.5 gigabits. And after summertime, it goes back to 1 gig of traffic. AM6 carries for IP transit over 3 terabits of traffic. So GRX is 1,000 times less than the internet traffic. It's peanuts. When we look at GRX traffic from a revenue point of view, it's not that big at all. Most service providers, when they buy GRX, they buy a few megs of traffic. That's it. And some small service providers, their entire international GRX demand is less than 1 meg of traffic. Now, LTE could increase that. But I have 4G in the US. When I come here, I don't use roaming that often. Not because I got here and I only have 3G and I'm very disappointed because it's slower than my 4G in the US. I don't use it because it's expensive. And it's not going to be cheaper because it's LTE. So unless the business model for roaming changes, the technology to enable it faster will not drive more traffic. So we look at IPX and we look at, okay, how much traffic is IPX going to get from LTE data roaming? A lot in the future. In the next 2-3 years, maybe not a lot. So this is just to say that when we look at LTE data and voice roaming, certainly this is a killer app, but it will take some time. Now, the other driver to go for IPX is to go for IP, providers need to compete over the top. They haven't found a way to offer services that can compete over the top. Going to IP is something they need to do if they want to create these new services, like HD voice. So those are the drivers, but there are also some challenges. So some of them are, even though people understand they need to go to IP, it's a new thing. And a lot of people are just like, well, I need to think about it still a bit more, how it's going to happen technically, operationally, what are the commercial business model. So going from one to another, it takes some concerns on QoS, etc. There are also internal priorities. People might say, well, the priority from the management is LTE on the domestic side, and that's where everybody's focused, that's where all the CapEx is going. That's fair. Some service providers don't have an IP access. They only have TDM access, so they need to think about investing in voice over IP. Do they invest in a SIP gateway? Do they wait for a SIP IMS or when they do LTE? It's all good questions that they're asking, and not everybody has the same answer. Some countries, for a regulation point of view, it's not favorable to interconnect in voice over IP. You don't get the same regulatory constraints, so even though it might be cheaper from the hardware side, from the price side and the regulatory side, you rather just stay put and keep doing TDM. And the business model in some cases is unclear. We still get the question, but if I do voice over IPX, is it going to be like the internet, bill and keep, free for all, free peering? It's not, but the question still arises. So we see that it is still, some service providers are still unclear. The conclusion of that is that there is not an answer for everybody. Every service provider will have its own constraints, every market will have its own constraints, not everybody is moving at the same time. Now, the GSMA recently has made some kind of internal discussion to say, okay, what we're doing as an industry, or the MNOs are doing as an industry, is spending billions of dollars to promote LTE. And they're looking at OTTs, they're complaining that OTTs are coming up with services that are WhatsApp, Viber, Skype, etc. So they're taking revenue out of the ecosystem for SMSs and voice and saying, well, we need to do something. What they're doing is they're looking at these over-the-tops and say, okay, I give you 3G, I give you Wi-Fi, and you create services. And the over-the-top say, okay, I create Viber, I create Skype, I make use of all that. And the MNOs say, okay, well, I'm going to give you a better 3G. I'm going to give you LTE. What are you going to do with it? So what are the OTTs going to do with it? They're going to do even more. So when Skype might not work very well in 3G, work fine on Wi-Fi, and 3G doesn't work very well, it will work perfectly over LTE. So if you look at the MNOs are doing, they're enabling their competitors to provide even better services. At the same time, MNOs are staying in circuit switch for voice. So they're enabling OTTs to do a better voice service on LTE, and they're doing in circuit switch. So what GSM is saying, well, we need to move to IP. We need to move these voice services that we have over circuit switch, we need to move that to IP. We need to do it not just because it's a better services, it's at least to remain relevant compared to what Skype and others are doing. Skype has from day one been offering HD voice because from day one they had their codec that was HD capable and they're doing over IP. MNOs cannot do HD voice if they don't move to IP. And they cannot offer it internationally if they don't connect to an IPX or some sort of IP connection. So there is a call of urgency saying, well, we need to move to IPX, and the sooner the better. Even if you don't find an immediate need, you need to do it quickly. Otherwise, we will lose relevancy. By the time we wake up and we all have the LTE's network done and interconnected, all this OTT will have created new services and will be way ahead of us. Now, IPX is first a managed QoS IP network. IPX, it stands for IP exchange. IP takes 2 letters in the entire 3 letters word. So for us, it's first an IP network. Here you have 2 service providers that connect to an IPX. An IPX provides managed quality with at the IP layer, with run through delay, packet loss, and jitter. These are the main criteria. However, it only commits to the quality at the border of the IPX, where the service provider connects to the IPX. So it excludes this part here of the interconnection. But the service provider experience is from their network to the other service provider network. So the GSMA in the IR34 since the beginning, the IR34 is a technical document that governs the IPX, one of them at least. Since the beginning, it said that this interconnection here should not be more than 20 kilometers. And the reason it says that is because if this connection here is short, I don't know where the 20 kilometers come, but to me it means local. If this connection is short, this one being the long one, then you can assume that end-to-end you get the quality of an IPX network. However, today, of what you get is a lot of this. A lot of service providers are connected to an IPX or GRX over the public internet. If you look at countries like in Africa or East Europe or remote countries in Asia, what you have, let's take the example of Africa, 2 countries in Africa or 1 in Africa and in the Middle East, they will go over IPsec over the internet up to a POP in London, and from a POP in London, they will exchange from another one to another one, and they will get an IPX or GRX service. So that means that over like a 6,000 kilometers path, you get 90% of the transport is over the public internet, and 10% is actually a private managed IP network. And that's called GRX and IPX. To us, that's not IPX. That's not the spirit of IPX. If you get all that over an unmanaged network and just a small part of a managed network, you don't really get the benefits of an end-to-end managed QoS. So the way it translates is that in most cases, traditional GRX networks, you only get a few POPs in the world. And for instance, if you are in Africa, we'll tell service providers you need to come to London, and you come to London on your own, either through internet with IPsec or a lease line or whatever. If you're in a remote country in Asia, you need to come to Singapore, which is the exchange for GRX, et cetera, et cetera. What we think needs to happen, and what PCCW Global is doing, is we extend dramatically the number of POPs around the world. So we cover 130 countries, so service providers can connect domestically to the IPX and guarantee that from one service provider to another, there will always be in a managed QoS network, and that's important. So how do we do that? It's not really rocket science. That's where we leverage our enterprise MPLS network. So we have an IP backbone that covers 130 countries, and IPX is a VPN on top of that IP backbone, and on top of that VPN, you have different services for IPX. So here we mention voice and NHD video conferencing. This is to us really important. I think someone mentioned, a colleague from Telia mentioned that some are advertising 200 connections on IPX, etc. We're very skeptical about that. Very, very skeptical about what these 200 connections. If it means IPsec access over the internet or public address over the internet, it doesn't, to us, it's not an IPX connection. Now, bandwidth is expensive. So these are just 2 examples to say when we do IPX, we need to go beyond just say, well, we have an IPX over MPLS, because that's not enough. So this is an example for some countries which traditionally will connect over the internet because a dedicated bandwidth is expensive. How do we reduce the cost? So in Africa, where connectivity over satellite, for instance, we developed a homemade box, hardware, software, and so on to compress or to reduce the headers of the IP packets. And we get like a 50% decrease in bandwidth usage for voice just by doing that. It doesn't change the payload, it doesn't change the codec, it doesn't change anything that affects the voice, it just changes the headers. But that 50% decrease in cost of bandwidth or usage of bandwidth enables us to provide still a direct, secure IP managed QoS at prices that are competitive with an internet transport. Something else that we do in Africa, another example, is saying that you send a call to Africa, you go to the country, that's fine. This is an example of DRC. DRC doesn't have a domestic network. So if you need to go from one city of DRC to another one, you will actually go from a satellite backhaul. So what's the point of going from the US to DRC over an IPX network if once you get into DRC, you need to do another hop of satellite and get bad quality, run trip delay, etc. So what we do there with some of our mobile operator customers there is connect to the HLR, find out where is the cell phone in the country, where is the cell phone that the call needs to go through, and send it to that connection. So we have direct interconnection to the different places of the network in DRC identify not just mobile number portability to identify that the call goes to this mobile operator, but within its network, find out where the mobile user is and send it to that part of the country directly, and avoiding another extra op. So to us, this is the extent of IPX, direct routing and going directly, really improving the QoS and the experience of the user. Another example on the same part is South Africa. So in South Africa, we develop our own solution, own Inium solution. And again, a lot of services are being sold in the market. We think that it's not really rocket science. So again, this is just a server. I don't know if it's a Sun server or whatever server we use, homemade software. We get an upload of the number portability database of South Africa into this local database in Belgium. And every time we have a call to South Africa, we look at where is the call going. So we have IPX connections to all the mobile operators in South Africa, and depending on where the call needs to go, we connect it directly. This is the spirit of IPX. IPX is means to provide direct routing. When you say I sell a call to whatever, Vodacom South Africa, it's a call to Vodacom South Africa. It's not just a call to South Africa, and maybe if you give it to MTN and it's not a call that goes to MTN, it actually goes to Vodacom, there will be a transcode, well, maybe transcoding or not, but there will be a transit through MTN. That's not what IPX means. IPX means direct routing, which also means when there is number portability that you need to manage it. Number portability is also for us an enabler of HD voice. If you want to offer HD voice, you need to be transparent 3 for the HD codec. But to be transparent 3 for the HD codec, if it's a call to Vodacom, if you send the call to MTN, MTN will not accept the HD voice call, certainly if it transits to Vodacom. So you cannot send it to the wrong carrier. You need to send it to the right service provider and be transparent for this HD codec. That means identifying that it's an HD call that you're carrying and managing routing portability. So we've been talking a lot about voice. This is a few words on our voice, what we mean by a voice over IPX service. So, and we proudly say that we are compliant with the i3 Forum and GSMA specs for that. So for us, and there were some animations here, but they've disappeared. But for us, voice over IPX is first a customer that connects to us directly in IP, either with SIP or CPI, but there is no internet, no public IP addresses. This is a private direct connection to one of our POPs. We carry it through our network directly to the target customer that's also connected in IP to us. We have 40 destinations that are IPX compliant. We advertise those to the customer. We think that it's important to tell our customers, here are the 40, actually I think it's 41 now, here are the 41 destinations that are directly connected to us. Then we also advertise destinations that we call indirect. So those are destinations with other IPX partners that we connect to. They might have 10, 20, whatever it is, directs. So their directs become our indirects. And then we have, still to complement, to have a full A to Z, we have all the other destinations that might be some of our directs, but are not IPX compliant, meaning that they might be still on TDM. So on a monthly basis, we tell our customer that is getting voice over IPX from us, we tell them, well, here are the destinations. Here is a full A to Z list. Out of this full A to Z list, here are the IPX destinations that are direct. Here are the IPX destinations that are indirect, and all the other ones are directs, but are not through IPX compliant. So, to give you an example, we have over 100 destinations that are over IP. All end up in our MPLS network, in our MPLS backbone, and what we call our IPX. But not all of these 100 plus voice over IP destinations are IPX compliant, because a lot of them, actually most of them, come from our IP transit network. So still very good quality because it's our own IP transit network, but they're not IPX compliant. IPX compliant means a private IP address directly connected to our network, no use of internet. So when we hear 200, whatever it is, we're quite skeptical about that, and we think the industry needs to be more transparent on what we provide, what we don't provide. When we talk about TDM at ITW, historically, people tell you, here are my directs in TDM. And that means that they have a direct connection in TDM to the service provider. They don't just say, well, I have TDM. Well, okay, fine. In IPX, they should not say, well, I have voice over IPX. Okay, fine, but to which destinations? What are your directs? So that needs to be disclosed, and that will add value overall to the entire industry. So if we look at these destinations, we're very happy with the map that i3 Forum came up with, I think we need to have more and more of these maps. So here are our destinations. So there is some color coding, the burgundy, whatever color this here is. Those are our direct connections. The blue ones are indirect. Cannot even read. Yeah, the blue ones are indirects, means partners, and the orange ones are the ones that we're working on. So very straightforward approach of what IPX is. What we tell our customers too is sometimes customers say, well, but in IPX I'm going to get a better quality because it's over a managed network end-to-end because there is no blending. So when we send a call over IPX, we don't say, well, 90% of the time it's going to go through direct, but 10% of the time we're going to blend a little bit because we need to guarantee the price like we do in TDM. In IPX there is no blending. It's 100% of the time the call goes through the destination network directly. It only goes to another route if there is an outage, but an outage is something that should not last. Other than an outage cases, it's a direct routing. So you get a real guarantee of CLI and all these events. But some customers say, well, I'm already happy with the quality I have. I don't need something extra, which is fair point. What we say, though, is that what the industry should be trying to create is an ecosystem. So maybe you don't want to buy IPX or quality in IPX, but maybe somebody wants to send you calls in IPX. If you do not connect to an IPX ecosystem, you're preventing somebody else that is willing to buy your destination in an IPX connection to do it. So we're telling our customers, you have two reasons to connect. One is if you want the quality, if you want to send calls with that quality, and two is if you want to receive calls with that quality and be part of that ecosystem. So beyond IPX, so what we try to do is once we connect these customers to our network, usually it's a gig port and we create a VLAN for voice, for whatever the voice traffic is, but we don't limit it to that. We try to leverage it with other services. So right now we have HDVC, which we think is really something that should take off and will take off in the future. HDVC, so it means high definition video conferencing. We try to bring it beyond conferencing and enable point-to-point HD video calling. And the HD part here, it's important because HD means high definition, means high bandwidth, high QoS, and all these I is what the internet cannot offer. Internet can offer best effort and that's it. So as soon as you need like a service that's high demand in bandwidth and in QoS, IPX is the way to go. We also offer IPX transport and some SS7 transit. We're working in these mobile products for SS7 diameter, so we have that in the process. But I explained earlier, for us, the real focus right now is voice, is where we think the value is right now and for the coming months, coming 2-3 years. Even though we need to work on the other services that will mature later on, the real ones that are mature and primed to move to IPX are voice and HDVC. So again, this is a conclusion slide. So we try to keep it very simple. This is our definition of IPX. A direct connection, short connection, no use of internet, no use of IPsec. Easy interconnection with SIP and SIP-I, compliant with the I3 forum. Very transparent disclosure of directs and indirects, so we don't just say we have IPX, we say, well, we have IPX and here are destinations, here is what you don't get. It's also important to explain what customers cannot get, so there is no confusion. Same business model as today. IPX is a technology change, it's not a business model change. And the business model we think will change depending on what happens at the edge. What drives the business model, the voice business model, is the regulated domestic termination fees and so on. So when that changes, then eventually the wholesale market will change as well. But technology has nothing to do with that change. It will be a facilitator eventually, but it's not a condition or a prerequisite at all. Transport cost, again, if you do IP, you can leverage different services into one pipe, so you save on the cross connects, you save on the bandwidth, much more efficient and better QoS because you get automatic redundancy through MPLS networks, which you don't get if you have a dedicated TDM pipe. Again, so this is it. We're trying to, for us, what's in it for me for IPX, we need to bring it down to something that's tangible. Not smoke and mirrors, not high-tech. We're not going to save the planet with it. We're trying to bring it, to make it very clear, very simple, easy to understand, and therefore easy to compare and easy to buy, make this kind of decision. And that's it. Thank you.